And then finally I found something. I found something that would have been a really, it would have paid me well enough to have eliminated my need to have been with Alvaro. If I didn't want to be with him, I wouldn't have had to be with him. But if there were people in the United States government who thought that the best way was trying to the best way to force me back to him was to have me penniless and not employed, then those individuals would most likely try to disrupt any kind of gainful employment that I did get, because I did get gainful employment. I got hired as a waitress for a sort of casual place down on the harbor where a bunch of yachts docked. And it was a seafood restaurant. I asked the servers there what their typical tips were per night, what was the average, and they said about $300 a night. So that, along with the higher minimum wage scale in Washington state of around $6 or more per hour, that was very good pay per night for me. I mean, at least it was something I could potentially live off of, and maybe even have enough money for looking for a private attorney with. It also would have meant that I could have gotten into my own housing a lot more easily. So I actually really liked this woman that I met. I thought she seemed very smart. She sort of reminded me briefly, her intellect and demeanor reminded me of Lori Cartwright's demeanor. She presented herself as a woman who was very attractive but not jealous of other women, who was interested in helping other women to succeed independently. And that sort of a strong personality on her own. And I really liked her on first impression. I had a good feeling about her. I could have been wrong about her maybe, but the thing that was very bizarre is that as soon as I got a job, I mean, I had people trying to force me to take this minimum wage tent job out in public, you know, in Pioneer Square for minimum wage, carrying a huge tent around. They wanted me to take that job, but as soon as I got a job that actually would have really helped me financially, I was suddenly put into jail on a false arrest. I was set up, and I was blocked from taking that job. And basically Wenatchee colluded to have me thrown into jail the night before I was going to go to Seattle and start training in that position. It was probably the worst thing that happened to me around that time, because I had just got a very good job, and it was a very promising sign that I might be able to work at getting all of my records together and having some stability to be able to prove that my son should be returned to me, and also giving me stability enough to prove that crimes have been committed against us. And instead I was punished. Yeah, the first time that I was under false arrest in Wenatchee was by Wenatchee officers who made their own statement against me, and then the entire thing had to be thrown out because it was false. But they first put me in jail for 14 days. And they did that to me. They put me in jail the night before I was going to speak to an FBI, to a reporter about the FBI. And then the second time that I was ever put under false arrest by Wenatchee was the night before I was going to start this job. And It prevented me from getting to work and doing any of my training, prevented me from getting back to Seattle. And what was really horrific is that the woman that I was staying with, this woman who said she was a Mormon and whose partner was Canadian, she knew that I got the job. And then she knew the man who was giving me a ride to Wenatchee. And that man ditched me. He was supposed to take me back to Seattle, and instead he dumped me off in Wenatchee. Okay, so this is like a really strange situation where I'm getting housing. I'm being put up with housing for about 2 weeks by Shannon Borg, who's a wine reviewer in Seattle, and her Canadian partner. And at that time, I'm thinking maybe there's some nice Canadians out there. And yes, of course, there are some nice Canadians out there. But, you know, I'm somehow still running into the ones that are connected to the Middletons. Which is really starting to look like they're connected to, I mean, and I've said that before. It's very, very obvious that the Middletons are not just working for England. So, I mean, it was horrible. One of the worst things that had been done to me at that point was being set up, I mean, getting this job. I told Shannon about it. I told her how much it was going to be and everything, and I said I need to go back to Oregon to this one court hearing, and then I'll be back. And I put an ad in Craigslist to get a ride because she couldn't take me. So I was going to get a ride from someone. Who when he got to the house, the thing that was strange is when he got to the house, I thought it was just the stranger who was offering to give me a ride after I put in my request on Craigslist in Seattle. So this person who said he could do it and who sounded safe, when he arrived, he was a very good-looking man, and I assumed that wait a second, I'm actually thinking that this guy was possibly not somebody that I met on Craigslist, but I think I met him at that same yacht area, the same harbor where I got the job. And I think I met him that same day, and he said that he was going in that direction. We started talking a little bit, and he gave me his phone number and said that he had worked on ships. He'd done some repair on ships and that kind of thing there. And he approached me. I didn't approach him. I remember he approached me, and he gave me his phone number and everything, and I took down his information. And then I called him up and asked him if he could give me a ride. I did possibly also put in an ad request to Craigslist. I'll have to check on that. But regardless, the bizarre thing is that Shannon knew him. They knew each other. I have no idea how they knew each other, but they did. And as soon as she saw him, she said a couple things to him, and then I saw him, and she gave him this very intense look, like, are you in on this kind of a look. I really don't know how to describe it, but she said a couple things that indicated she did know him. So she kind of gave it away by what she said. And I don't remember exactly what it was that she said, but I remember she said something. And then she also gave him this look and nod and he did with her as well. And like they were in agreement about something. And then the most horrible thing is that he basically drove the entire way, the entire time he was taking me back to Wenatchee, he was asking me what I wanted to do. And he said, do you want to travel? He kept asking me over and over if I wanted to travel. It was like almost like a personality quiz again, you know. What do you like to do? Where do you want to go? What would be your most favorite thing to do? Your least favorite thing to do? Do you want to travel? Would you like to travel? Are you interested in traveling? And he kept bringing that up over and over. And really wanted to know, like, where did I want to travel? What ideas had I had about that? And I remember when he started asking about all these travel questions, I started wondering if he was CIA. Because why? It was almost like he was interviewing me for something, but I wasn't sure why he needed to know so much, whether or not I wanted to travel. And then once we got to Wenatchee, I had to go to this hearing, and then what he knew is that I needed to go to the hearing, and then he was going to go back to Seattle with me. He was never, not once was it going to be that I get dumped off in Wenatchee. I told him, and he knew that I had a job that I was starting the next day, or within a couple days. And the entire time the agreement was that he was taking me over there and then he was going to take me back to Seattle. So instead, this man dropped me off at the courthouse, and then he took off. So basically, I had no car. I was trapped in Wenatchee, and I had a job that I had to get to in Seattle within a couple of days. There was no reason at all that there was no reason that I would have missed that job. I would have figured out some way to get there. Whether it was by a bus, I found out that I checked the bus and train and everything, and there was nothing that was leaving on a time that I needed to go. Like, for some reason, everything was booked. But I went back to my computer, and I was looking for maybe getting a ride on Craigslist, and I was making a bunch of phone calls, and I knew that I could get to, I knew that I would be able to get to Seattle and be able to be there for the job training. I tried emailing and contacting Shannon Borg, and she said that she couldn't do it, couldn't help, you know, couldn't pick me up and take me back over there. And I mean, it's one of these, yeah, I'm sorry, but I can't. I mean, I still remember her tone of voice and everything. And then what happened is that I walked out of the courthouse, and I had no way of getting back to the hotel where all of my belongings were, and it was too far for me to walk. So there was this guy driving by extremely slowly, and he asked me, he said, "Do you need a ride? I'm going towards this such and such a place." And I did, because I was ditched. I'd just been ditched, and I didn't have any of my things with me, and I had to get to my belongings. So I was basically unexpectedly then presented, and I knew right away, I had this weird feeling that that man who had just ditched me, that he knew the guy who had just pulled up next to me and offered me a ride back to my hotel room. And the strange thing is that that man knew somebody from Kentucky or Arkansas or something. It was like from the Midwest, but they were somehow connected to police in Wenatchee, and I don't know why or how. I think that since I figured out they were connected to police in Wenatchee, it's a safe bet to say that since Shannon Borg works for the United States government, and she knew the man that picked me up and gave me a ride to Wenatchee and then ditched me, it's a safe bet to say that